Hi, and welcome to the Pollsters. I'm Margie O'Mara, Democratic pollster with PSB Research.
And I'm Kristen Soltis Anderson, Republican pollster with Echelon Insights.
And each week we bring you the polls driving the news in politics, tech, and pop culture.
So we're so excited to have Christine Matthews on with us today. She is the head of Bellwether Consulting, and she is a Republican pollster that I've worked with on projects before. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christine.
Oh, so glad to be with you.
So tell us a little bit about your firm and some of the clients that you've worked with. You and I have bumped into each other in Indiana, where I've done some work. You've done some work. That makes you a bit of a Pence expert. I don't know if that's a word, but maybe it's a word. Maybe we can coin it today. Tell us a little bit about your clients that you've worked with in the past.
So with my company, Bellwether Research, I have worked with a lot of clients from Indiana. I'm originally from Indiana and did both of Governor Mitch Daniels' campaigns. Still work with a lot of clients there, do a lot of Indiana polling. In the 2012 cycle, I did polling for DePaul University in Indiana and Howey Politics. And nationally, I worked with John Kasich this election cycle and work on a lot of issues and policy for a lot of issue and policy clients. My other hat that I wear is as a partner of Burning Glass Consulting, which is an all-women Republican consulting firm where we focus on women voters. So I kind of wear two hats, but I'm wearing my Bellwether hat right now so we can talk about Indiana.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about Indiana. I mean, what I thought was pretty striking from the coverage of the Pence pick was, oh, this is going to really help conservatives are really mollified now. You saw some folks saying that in the, kind of man or woman on the street interviews yesterday and the first day of the convention coverage. But he wasn't doing very well in his state. Can you tell us what you found?
Sure. The last time Indiana sent a candidate to be the vice presidential nominee, I was actually working for the Indiana Republican Party. And that was 1988, and it was Dan Quayle. And Dan Quayle was the U.S. Senator from Indiana and was hugely popular in the state. Later, in the campaign, he sort of got this reputation of being a lightweight, when he misspelled potato and said a mind is a terrible thing to lose when he was trying to say, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Anyway.
I forgot that one.
Right. So, but none of us thought he was this lightweight. I mean, he was really, really popular. Now, Mike Pence is not similarly situated. He started out in 2012 when he was elected in a closer than expected race for governor. He won by about 4 points. Mitt Romney won the state in 2012 by 10 points. So it was closer than expected. He started out well enough, inherited a state from Mitch Daniels that was going really well, sort of focused on economic issues, and had an approval rating that was sort of heading into the 60% range. So things were going really well. Then about a year ago, last spring, March of last year, came the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And this was basically seen as an attempt to discriminate against the LGBT community. Huge backlash from the business community in Indiana, from suburban Republicans, from what you would call the Mitch Daniels wing of the Republican Party in Indiana. So, his approval rating, we were doing polling, dropped by like 20, 25 points. Right now, he sort of sits at a net disapproval.
Was that across the board? Was that with Republicans and independents and Democrats, or just Democrats and independents?
No, it happened with Republicans too, and it happened with, your basic. We've got these vote-rich counties, suburban counties surrounding Indianapolis. They're called the donut counties, and that is, basically fiscally conservative, somewhat more socially moderate, or at least not on the radar screen kind of voters. And those are the ones, what we call the Mitch Daniels Republican types, that really were turned off. And the business community. I mean, huge companies like Angie's List or Eli Lilly in Indiana came out very strongly against this. So that was a real problem. And then in an attempt to sort of fix it, he went on and did an interview with George Stephanopoulos at the end of March, which was a disaster because George Stephanopoulos wanted to ask him, should someone be able to discriminate against someone who's gay or lesbian? Do they have to bake the wedding cake? Do you think that's right? Anyway, Pence never got around to answering that. So it was seen as a huge embarrassment. So people from Indiana are very proud of their state and want to see it represented well, don't want to see it as some sort of backward place. So, the Stephanopoulos interview was seen as a huge embarrassment. And in fact, if you go to the website trump-pence.com, someone has bought that and it goes right to the Stephanopoulos interview. So that's not very helpful. Yeah, in terms of introing him.
There were obviously there's lots of procedural failures of what's been going on with the Trump convention. I mean, this is, day one is over when we're recording this and lots of people are talking about the Melania speech. But one of the things that was, that people were talking about a few days ago was all the different online steps that the Trump campaign skipped in their VP rollout. And one of them was buying up all the websites. They didn't buy any of the Trump.Pence combinations out there. Lots of them were gone. So all kinds of groups snatched up all kinds of different combinations.
Oh, absolutely.
Going to never Trump. I mean, every group got in there and was able to get one. That's how easily that, they were able to do that, how many holes were in that particular part of the process.
Well, and not only that, they lost 2 to 3 critical days in terms of introducing Mike Pence to the American people. So the Clinton campaign and the Democratic allies basically came in and produced a 1-minute video. Let me introduce you to, Mike Pence, which basically portrayed him as anti-gay, anti-women, anti-Planned Parenthood, and anti-immigrant. So they lost that too. People don't know outside of Indiana, probably people don't really know who Mike Pence is. I was basically sort of outlining how even in Indiana, he's a very polarizing figure. And in fact, was in no way reassured of reelection in November. The same Democrat, John Gregg, who ran against him in 2012, was running against him this year. And I had not had Mike Pence above 41% in any of my polling. And that's with a sample of maybe plus 10 Republicans. So it was a real referendum on Mike Pence that really wasn't looking very good.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing that I find interesting. I mean, Pence was not, he wasn't kind of out there like my sense is like he's a happy warrior, just, devil may care, just, even if it sounds unpopular, just sort of charging ahead with his positions, however extreme. He seems like trying to have it both ways. And maybe that's why he wasn't particularly popular. I guess what I find confusing is how all of this translates to, he's going to be a real asset to Trump on the ticket. That's the part that, I don't see from the polling, given he's not very well known nationally. He's net unfavorable nationally to the extent he's even known. He's not popular in his home state. Where's the asset part come in?
So there are solid reasons to pick Mike Pence, given the last 3 that were standing. But what Mike Pence doesn't do is he doesn't expand the tent at all. He doesn't appeal to women voters or swing voters. What he does do is bring some level of comfort to members of Congress. Speaker Paul Ryan, I think, feels like he can work with Mike Pence were Trump to be elected president. And also, nationally, I think evangelicals, social conservatives who might have been wary about Trump, although in the 60 Minutes interview, Trump sort of implied that he didn't need Mike Pence because he won the evangelicals. But anyway, if there were some evangelicals that Donald Trump had not convinced, Mike Pence is someone very, very solid nationally, in that community. It's not any kind of expansion, outreach pick, somebody who's going to attract new people to the fold. Not at all.
Yeah, but so let's talk about that. Well, first, it's not only that he's not, I guess there's this argument that he mollifies Republicans. I don't, he's not doing well in Indiana, which is a pretty Republican state. It's hard for me to see the case that he's not well known nationally. It's harder for me to see the case that he's going to somehow magically appeal to evangelicals and Republicans around the country if he's, just doing kind of mediocre to bad in a Republican state. I mean, Paul Ryan can't help Trump win the presidency. I mean, he's got to be able to not just appeal to Republicans, but, folks outside of that, Republican base. And I'm not sure I'm seeing the data that suggests that Pence can do that. And then when it comes to expansion, Trump has so much damage that how can Pence, who's not doing very well in his home state, even make any inroads in that, gaping black hole that Trump is finding himself in? I mean, what do you think? I mean, you're trying to reach out, to Republican women. I mean, what do you think about Pence or Trump and their ability to reach, to expand, or even just keep the ground that Republicans have made? Forget about expanding, just holding their own.
Yeah, it's been very difficult. As I said, I work with John Kasich. So my position on Donald Trump is John Kasich's position. It's Mitt Romney's position. I am not a supporter or a fan of Donald Trump. That's my position. So, it's difficult for me to see, and it's quite frankly difficult for me as someone who has tried to focus on attracting women voters to see Trump double down on sort of the angry white male vote, because, we have enough problems. The Republican Party has enough problems already being seen as the angry white male party. And, in 2012, we had some real challenges. We had some high profile gaffes, from Senator Todd Akin saying legitimate rape to Richard Murdoch in Indiana talking about pregnancy resulting from rape being part of God's will. So I feel like in 2014, we had really gone forward. We had made a lot of progress. There were no gaffes. Our firm was working with 6 Senate races, and we won all of them. The Republicans took back the Senate. I feel like we had really advanced the ball. Now I feel like we're back on the 1-yard line, and that we've doubled down on being the party of the angry white male.
Yeah, I mean, so what could Republicans do next? I mean, I guess there are a couple different steps, right? The first is, what do down ballot races do? What do Republicans, whatever's happening now for the governor's race and the Senate race in Indiana, or in other more consistently battleground states like in Pennsylvania and Ohio and New Hampshire and Colorado, what can these Republicans do to kind of step aside from Trump's shadow, focus on expanding the tent, focus on reaching out to women, focus on reaching out to non-whites or younger voters? And what would you recommend in terms of what you see in the data? What would you recommend they do?
Well, the one good thing, and we're active, in a lot of these sort of Senate races or down ballot races, is that at this point, I mean, and it's early because, all the advertising hasn't really taken effect, attempting to basically tie Trump to everyone who is running on the Republican ticket. But, I think, and it actually makes me sad because, Donald Trump at the top of the ticket is impacting people that I care about, people, friends and clients in tough Senate races like Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire or Rob Portman in Ohio. And both of them, of course, are avoiding the Republican convention, which is smart. And both of them, I think Rob Portman yesterday or today was out doing a kayak event for wounded warriors. And Kelly Ayotte has been in her home state talking about the opioid crisis and all that she's done in Congress. So that is what they have to do. They have to talk about ways that they are, involved with and advancing issues that people care about, and that they are not, part of this sort of angry, divisive rhetoric that's emanating from Trump and may in fact be emanating this week during the convention.
Yeah. And so, tell us, what other trends are you looking for? I mean, are there certain kinds of issues that people should be talking about? It's not simply so much as saying, I'm not going to go to the convention or, I don't support Trump. I mean, what else can Republicans be doing to try and, stay true to their conservative values, but still also reach out to some of these other groups and show that they're maybe not the party of Trump or they're, going someplace else in the future? I mean, what do you make of what's, of the issue landscape?
I think Ryan in the House is attempting to sort of set the table with those types of issues. They've come up, I don't remember, 4 or 5 issues that they're focusing on, the House Republican caucus is focusing on. And one of those, I think, has to do with poverty. And that's sort of an eyebrow raiser, I suppose, in terms of the stereotypical view of Republicans. Do you care about people who are poor? Do you care about people who aren't rich? And I think that's very beneficial. We, I think, need to get into the conversation on the issue of college affordability. That's a real concern with people. And there are a lot of options that are very consistent with Republican philosophy that are short of, everybody getting free college. And people are very open to, like, let's figure this out, whether it's, changing how we accredit universities, changing our definition of a college degree, capping tuition, whatever it is, let's figure that out.
Right.
I'm also of the mindset, and I speak for myself. I'm not speaking for my partners or anyone else. I'm a big believer in 2011, Mitch Daniels said, let's sort of call a truce on social issues so we can focus on so many of the pressing issues, whether it's, lifting everybody up out of poverty, giving everybody economic opportunity, race relations, education, the debt. I'm sort of a big believer in that, and I would like to see us move towards that. That's my personal view on things like that, and really focus on where people are day to day.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think a Mitch Daniels or John Kasich convention would look compared to what we've seen so far from the Trump convention?
Right. I mean, Mitch Daniels and John Kasich are similar, and that's why I really enjoyed working with both of them, because they are all about a positive message, lifting people up. So the message number one wouldn't be angry, hateful, trying to rile people up. I think it would be a very positive, inclusive message about everybody sharing in prosperity. I think that both of them would be much more positive about America's role in the world and America's future. They would focus a lot on, like I said, making sure everybody has a piece of that prosperity. So it would be, John Kasich, as you know, when he ran, he basically said, listen, I want to focus on being positive. Here's what I'm for. I don't want to get into name calling. I don't want to get into divisive rhetoric. And Mitch Daniels was like that too.
So you sound, I don't know, you don't sound particularly optimistic. I mean, how do you feel about Republicans' chances this cycle? And what do you think where do you think Republicans go from here? How do they sort of move beyond Trump past November?
I think the verdict is out yet on how our down ballot Republicans will do in these Senate races. I do think that, I feel optimistic about holding on to many of our Senate candidates, if not all of them. I'm hopeful that will happen. Unfortunately, I don't feel overly optimistic, even beyond, let's say Trump loses. Let's just say that, for example. Looking ahead, personally, I don't think the future of the Republican Party rests with like a Ted Cruz or even a Mike Pence. So for me, I just feel like, the demographics of the Republican Party are changing, and they have been changing. And, we're losing college-educated suburban voters. We're losing young people, and the Republicans are becoming the party of sort of non-college-educated, rural, small-town, older white people. And the country, in fact, is becoming just the opposite. So I think a lot of things will have to change. I think, Trump will have put the party in a bit of a hole, quite a big hole. But when I look ahead to 2020, I don't feel personally super optimistic, when I look at Ted Cruz or Mike Pence, because I don't feel like they have a forward-looking, positive, inclusive vision either. One that speaks to a changing America.
Right. And what do you think, too, about, the role that gender and race are playing in this election. I mean, it's not just about being inclusive sort of writ large or being positive versus being negative. I mean, you see, really encouraged by the campaign, some very gendered attacks and things that seem, things that would have been unthinkable years ago, that you would have seen John McCain, even when people were saying crazy things at his rallies, would try to shut down. So when you, for example, this Melania issue that came up last night, and that, she or somebody plagiarized a Michelle Obama speech, the Trump campaign said, well, this comes from the Clinton campaign every time they feel threatened by a woman. And that's such a bizarre gendered attack to me. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. Never mind the fact that it's not, none of that came from the Clintons. Let's just put that aside. But, what exactly would Hillary Clinton feel threatened by Melania about, except that there's just some women thing they want to talk about? I mean, there's something really, very unseemly and grotesque and retrograde about some of the language. I mean, what do you think about how Republicans get away from that?
Right. Over a year ago, our firm was asked to do some research on Hillary Clinton, like how would Republicans message against Hillary Clinton, with the assumption we would have like a normal Republican nominee. So what we did was we sort of tried to uncover some research about some nuances about, how to message to women. So, for example, we learned that in a debate, you shouldn't call her Mrs. Clinton or Hillary. You really need to call her Secretary Clinton. And you certainly need to not relitigate, sort of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. So all those things,
those are very good lessons that have not been followed.
Right. All those wonderful things we learned, they paid us for this great research, and it's completely out the window, right? Because Donald Trump talks about Hillary Clinton's voice giving him a headache, or Carly Fiorina's face being awful to look at. And could that be the face of a president? I mean, on and on and on. So it's beyond anything that you could have imagined, that we could have imagined a year ago. And so, again, coming from the perspective of a partner at Burning Glass, someone who's interested in reaching out and expanding to women voters, it's unimaginable that this is the rhetoric and that these are the actions and the conversation that we're actually dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, to bring it back to polling, I mean, what do you think are, I guess how should I phrase this? So, I mean, do you think this is about, how much of this is about representation or women's representation in the Republican Party? That if there were more Republican consultants, Republican advisors, Republican leaders and party operatives, this would be different? Or how much of it is simply the nature of the Republican Party in some way? And how much of it is just, is just Trump's hijacked it and this is just an aberration?
Kind of all of those things. So, Donald Trump is his own crazy, sort of misogynistic entity, in my opinion, right? So he's beyond the pale, over the top, crazy things that he says about women. But, beyond Donald Trump, what I, as a partner at Burning Glass, feel like, though, is that our party base basically, has said with his nomination, as our party's nominee, that they don't care if we say something, if we nominate somebody who is so offensive to women. And that is what I think has been really hard for me and, my partner, Katie Packer, who felt so strongly about opposing Donald Trump that she sort of led the leading super PAC, our principals PAC, against him. And both of us, we've talked about this. We feel like
she did a really great viral ad, which I have mentioned on the show, and I wrote a CNBC piece about it because I loved her ad and I interviewed her, and I thought she did a great job.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, Katie is a really conservative, Republican woman, and both of us have talked about. I'm less conservative, certainly, and we both talked about, do we have a place in a party that, nominates somebody like Donald Trump, or doesn't seem to care? In 2014, I think we felt like we had a real stake in things. And people were seeking us out, and there was a real interest in appealing to women voters and attracting women. And, I think we'll get back to that point, but it's hard to see that pathway, and we all have to be asking ourselves, again, as college educated women, but also people who've worked in the party for decades, like, is there a role for us? Mm-hmm. And that's a tough conversation to be having with yourself, honestly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so when you are out circulating in Republican circles and people are talking about this, I mean, what do you think the answer is? Is the answer like, okay, this is just, 2016, it's crazy, and then we'll just get back to normal? Or is there some real soul searching that maybe there's something else going on in the Republican Party that needs to be excised in some way? Or is the answer that you leave it or go someplace else, find another home somehow?
Right. I think it depends on the person. I think, there's certainly some people who think, what am I staying for? And I was trying to express that, when I look ahead, to 2020, am I staying for someone like Ted Cruz or someone like Mike Pence? Is that a reason to sort of continue to stay involved? Other people, but then there's so many people that, like Kelly Ayotte or Rob Portman or John Kasich, or, that are so good and that you believe in. And so it becomes really difficult. I think there's a lot of soul searching, not just, for Republican women, but, men too, to figure out, who are we? A lot of things were thrown out the window, with this. I think that's certainly a conversation worth having.
Well, could you just tell us briefly before we wrap up, just a little bit about how you got into polling? And I know we've been saying some pessimistic doom and gloom here, but how do you feel about the industry and people going into it? We have a lot of young grad students and young new folks entering the field who want to learn a little bit more about how to become pollsters.
Yeah, it's like so much in life, which is, it wasn't my intention, but it's been a really wonderful thing that I've enjoyed so much. My intention was to be a communications person. So actually I started out with the Indiana Republican Party, working on races. And then I came out to Washington and actually worked for the National Women's Political Caucus as their press secretary. So that was the direction I was heading. Ended up not feeling like it was a very bipartisan organization. So joined the Worthling Group and kind of learned polling with the people who now run public opinion strategies, and have been working, in this industry for 20, 25 years. And, I really love it. And for somebody who, I don't have a doctorate in statistics, and I kind of enjoy the fact that I think Barack Obama and now Hillary Clinton's pollster, is it Joel Benenson? I think maybe was a drama major. So I think what I think is the best about this field is, it really, for me, it's about people, and it's about the stories they're telling through the numbers or in focus groups through what they're telling us. And that's what I love. That's what I really love about it.
Well, great. So can you tell folks how to find you on Twitter, or find out more about Burning Glass or about Bellwether?
Sure. My Twitter handle is C Matthews Polls. Bellwether is, a lot of people think it's spelled like the weather, but it's BELLWETHER, bellwetherresearch.com, and Burning Glass Consulting online, both those places you can find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Christine. We really appreciate it. And Kristen, sorry she couldn't join, but she is in the noisy throes of the queue and couldn't find a quiet spot. So, but thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
So good to talk to you. Thanks, Margie.